Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining our session, How to Build a Kick-Ass Life with Kevin Dahlstrom. We are super excited for the content he is going to share with us today. My name is Allison Farrell. I'm Fireside's Director of Marketing. If we haven't met before, it's nice to meet you. And I have with me our CEO, Bart Yancey, who's going to share just a little bit about Fireside before we get started with Kevin's amazing session. So as people join, you will we'll give people kind of just a minute to join, but this session also is being recorded, so if you have to hop out during any time, we will send the recording to you later. And for those of you joining us from the recording, we are glad to have you with us as well. So we'll turn it over to Bart.
Excellent. Hey, thank you, everyone. Like Allison said, I'm Bart Yancey, the CEO of Fireside, and we're excited to have you join us today. Kevin's going to give a great talk, and we've really enjoyed a lot of Kevin's content, and I think you'll really enjoy this session today. But I'm going to spend just a minute here. And for those of you that aren't familiar with Fireside, I wanted to introduce who we are as an organization. And I wanted to start with one of our members here. You see, Dr. Lauren Dean is a pediatric dentist in Birmingham, Alabama, and is a Fireside member. And it's interesting because Lauren, not in addition to being a pediatric dentist, she is also a CEO, a CFO, a VP of customer success, a VP of marketing, and a human resources director. So she has her hands full. Lauren spends, as you all know, the majority of her days working on patients, but she also has a business to run, and that's where Fireside comes in. And so, as a pediatric dentist, Lauren, as well as our other members, are responsible for everything, which can be overwhelming and extremely stressful. And what Fireside is doing for our membership is we're helping you look at the primary aspects of your business, which are your people, your expenses, your revenue, and your development. And we are providing solutions to help you address each of these areas and really run a better business. And so, as an independent pediatric dental practice, there are a couple of options that you have. And the first is to remain independent and to run your business the way you are right now. And again, that can be very stressful. You're having to make all of the decisions by yourself. A lot of times you're not able to participate in the things that you could, discounts on services and other aspects of your business that you could participate in if you were a part of a group. But the big advantage is you own your own business. And the other option that you have is, of course, selling your practice to a DSO. And for a lot of you, that's not a very attractive option. I know that some may be considering that, but a lot of you really enjoy running your own practice and making those decisions, but you just need help. And so for Fireside, what we're developing is we are developing and have a process that allows independent pediatric dentists to be a part of our community. And we're able to bring the best of both worlds. So you're a part of a group. We give you the opportunity to have the business support that our organization provides for you. And then we also are able to provide a lot of the benefits that you could receive from a DSO or being part of a group. And that's services, that's consulting, that's discounts on a lot of your services. And so as an independent pediatric dentist, we are experts for what keeps you up at night, because we know that it's really the business side of what you do is what keeps you up at night. And so we want to be that partner to help relieve that burden. So when we think about what's a good fit for Fireside, who is a good fit for Fireside, it's someone that is open to improving and changing some things with their business. And it could even be those of you that are looking to potentially sell in the future. Those that aren't a good fit for Fireside are the ones that say, I'm fine where I am right now. I don't need any help. And we totally get that. There may be some of you in that position, but we think that the large majority of you could enhance your business side of your practice and really use some support. And that's what we're here for. And very quickly, I'll give you a snapshot of our member journey. And so the first thing that we do with our members is we implement what we call quick wins. And quick wins is where we're able to pull a couple of levers in your practice to generate significant savings in the first 90 days of being a Fireside member. And after we've secured those savings for our members, then we actually provide a practice health assessment. And what we're doing there is we're helping you identify the different areas of your business and where you're feeling pain and where you could improve what you're doing. And since we've secured savings on the front end, you now have the opportunity to reinvest in some of those pain point areas of your practice. And what we've seen, and this is a business principle that applies to really all businesses, is when we reinvest with quality services and support into our people, into growing our revenue, into developing our practice and our people, that all of a sudden we see the profits increase and we see the stress levels ease up. And so that's what we're doing with our members, is creating savings, giving you opportunities to reinvest in the areas that are causing issues, and then to really see those profits increase and to see your overall and joy increase as well. So thank you for the time today. We look forward to Kevin's talk, and we're going to turn it over to you, Kevin.
I think you might be on mute, Kevin. We're not getting audio come through. There we go.
Hi,
Perfect.
everybody. I'm going to share my screen and we'll dive right in. Okay. Thanks, guys. Thanks for taking the time to listen to my talk today. The fact that every person listening to this talk right now is a doctor tells me that all of you are high achievers, and you're probably well on your way already to building a great career. You may already have a great career, a great business, and that's what Fireside is here to help you with. But I'm here to tell you that a great career is not the same thing as a great life. And so what I'm going to talk to you about today is what I've learned about how to build both, how to have a great career, but also a great life. And so just real quick background on me, because most of you probably haven't heard of me. I've done a lot in both my professional and my personal life. I'm 54 years old. I've been a 3-time executive in public companies. I've founded 5 companies. One of them went public, so I got to ring the bell at the New York Stock Exchange, which was a bucket list thing for me. My proudest achievement is being a dad to 2 teenage girls. Been married to my wife for 27 years, and we live here in Boulder, Colorado. These days, I spend most of my time rock climbing, and I tell you all this stuff not to brag, but just to say that I've done a lot. And trust me when I say I've learned everything the hard way. And the whole idea of my talk today is to share the lessons I've learned over the past 30, 35 years, so you don't have to learn the lessons the hard way, the way I did. So I'll start with a personal story. So in September of 2017, I lived in Dallas, Texas, and I was out for an evening run, and I got a call from the CEO of the company I worked at. I was the chief marketing officer for a multi-billion-dollar company, and we were in the midst of selling the company. And the CEO said, "Hey, Kevin, we got a meeting with Masa tomorrow. I need you to be at DFW Airport tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. And the Masa that my CEO was referring to was Masa's son, who is the legendary billionaire CEO of SoftBank, which is a Japanese conglomerate. They had recently launched a new private equity fund called the Vision Fund. It was a $100 billion fund. It's the largest private equity fund that's ever existed. And they were looking at buying our company. And so I told my CEO, I'll be there. So the next morning I show up at DFW Private Terminal, and I got a little bit of a surprise. Being an executive in big companies, I'd flown on private jets a bunch of times before, but this time it turns out that the whole plane was for me. And so it was one of those pinch me moments that the flight attendant took this picture of me, and you can see the big dumb grin on my face. It was sort of one of those moments where I said, wow, Kevin, you've come a long way from bagging groceries for $3 an hour in South Texas. And as if that wasn't crazy enough, the day got even crazier because it turns out this big meeting we were having was to be at Masa's house in Riverside, California. And at the time, this house was the most expensive house in the US. Masa had paid $150 million for this house. And when I tell you it was crazy, that doesn't begin to describe it. We got to the front door, they asked us for our shoe size and handed us Burberry slippers to wear in the house. There's priceless art, ornate gold inlays everywhere. And we're ushered into the meeting room, which was the dining room of the house, which is this like big 50-person table. And the SoftBank team's on one side, we're on the other. So a high pressure moment. So we dive into our presentation. And at some point during that presentation, I kind of looked around the room and, here I was at arguably the pinnacle of my career. It doesn't get any higher than this in the business world. And yet my urge was to run. I looked around the table and I saw a bunch of people who didn't look healthy. I knew a lot of them were unhappy. I knew a lot of them had broken family relationships. These weren't people I wanted to emulate. And so here I was like at the top, and all I wanted to do was run. And it reminded me of one of my favorite quotes from kind of a hero of mine, a guy named Yvon Chouinard. He's the founder of the clothing brand Patagonia. He was a legendary rock climber. And he said, when you reach the summit, you realize there's nothing there. And that's exactly what happened to me. I'd spent my whole life climbing the corporate ladder, and I reached the summit and realized it wasn't the life I wanted. And so I did something that I don't think many people actually do, which is I hit the reset button. So within a few weeks of that meeting, actually, I quit my job. I moved my family from Dallas, Texas to Boulder, Colorado, and kind of did a complete reboot. And when I did that, I started to get messages from my friends that went something like this, like, dude, have you lost your mind? Like on paper, I had, the dream job. I lived in a huge house in the suburbs. I had a beautiful family. Like I had it all. And here I was throwing it away. And I shared some of those same feelings myself. I was sort of following my gut, but I'd wake up at night saying, what have I done? I walked away from like a perfect situation. What are people going to think about this? Is it going to hurt my kids? Will my marriage survive all of this? But I also started to get a different kind of message from a different type of person. So a lot of my friends are really successful in their careers. There's some of the people society would say are the most successful people. And so, for example, one of my friends is the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, and he reached out to me and said, hey, Kevin, good for you. I've got this big job and I'm miserable. My personal life isn't great. Another friend of mine was a 10-year NFL starter. He had an incredible career in the NFL, retired at age 32, which you would think would be the dream. And he really struggles with boredom. He's like, dude, my life's not that great. I'm bored. I don't know how to fill my time. And another friend had recently sold his company for $1.2 billion cash. He started a company, huge exit. He had all the money in the world, but he doesn't have a partner. He doesn't have a family. He used to talk about being so lonely. And so here's like these people that society would say are the most successful people, and yet they're not happy. And around the same time, I saw this quote from Jim Collins. If you don't know who Jim Collins is, he's a famous business author. So he wrote Good to Great and a bunch of other business books. He's probably talked to more successful business people than any living human. And I read this quote and it really hit me hard. He said, most of the best business leaders I've observed don't have great lives. And that was a huge red flag for me. I mean, if Jim Collins, who's talked to more business leaders than anyone, says that most of these people don't have great lives, that really begs a question for all of us is what are we doing to be the exception? If you really do believe what I'm saying, what Jim Collins is saying, that a lot of successful business people aren't happy, don't have great lives, then you have to do something to be the exception to that rule. And so this is the point in my talk where I ask us to take a red pill. If you remember the movie The Matrix, Neo is asked to either take a red pill and learn the truth, but it can be painful, or take the blue pill and live in blissful ignorance. And so I'm assuming we all want to take the red pill. And here's the truth I'm going to tell you today. It's that almost everything society tells us about success is wrong. And I don't mean just a little bit wrong. I mean, way off the mark. And so if you want to build a great life, you have to be willing to go against the grain, like the guy in this picture. And it starts with this quote from one of my favorite authors, Annie Dillard. She says, "Everyone has great days. It's great lives that are hard to come by." And this quote is really profound because I think a lot of people think that a great life is just a bunch of great days strung together. So it's like you close a big deal, or you have a great night out with the guys or girls, or a hot date, or an incredible vacation. And if you just do enough of that stuff, if you just create enough highlights on your Instagram reel, then that's a great life. And that's actually not true. Great lives are made from different stuff. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to quickly cover 6 ideas that I've developed over time for building a great life. And my hope is that just one of these will impact you and cause you to think about your life a little bit differently. So let's start from the top. Number 1 is what I call define the dream. So if I asked all of you, what does your ideal life look like? You can probably sort of have a vague picture in your head of what that looks like. But I bet most of you haven't actually taken the time to write down what your ideal life looks like. And so when I was going through my change, I came up with this exercise that I call the ideal end state. It's a very simple but powerful exercise where you just get out a pad of paper, or in my case, I use the Notes app on my iPhone, and just write down in bullet points, like if you had no constraints, what does your best life look like? So like on my list, as you can see, there's things like freedom to live and work anywhere, control my schedule, challenging work done on my terms, sunshine and time outside. You can read on. It's different for everybody. Usually it's like 20 or 30 bullet points. But the reason this exercise is powerful, and I've gone through it with dozens of people, is because it sheds light on 2 things. Number 1, when you put together your ideal end state list, it really highlights the gaps in your life. And what I mean by gaps is the differences between what you say you want and what you're actually doing. And we all have gaps in our life. A simple example from my own would be, let's say I drove a Ferrari, which I don't, but let's say I drove a Ferrari. Well, you didn't see anywhere on my list where it said my ideal life involves driving a fancy car. So that would be a gap in my life because I'm spending time and money on something that actually isn't part of my ideal life. So when you see a gap, you have to ask yourself, did I get my ideal end state list wrong, or do I need to change my behavior? Because the goal is everything you do should move you towards your ideal end state, and you should avoid things that move you away from it. The second thing that people realize when they do this exercise, and which is really liberating, is most of the things most people want at the end of the day aren't very expensive. You know, we all have this idea in our mind that we need to be worth $50 million to live our best life. And that's just not true, because it really is true that the best things in life are free. What you really want is control of your time. And that's a good segue into my next idea, which is know your number. So if I asked all of you, you know, what is your retirement number? Like, how much money do you think you need to live your best life? You probably have a number in your head. Maybe it's like $2 million, $5 million, 10 million, 50 million, whatever it is. But that number usually is just pulled out of thin air. It's not really based on anything. And Harvard Business School looked at this issue, like how much do you need to be happy? They asked 2,000 millionaires, and these are people with a net worth between 1 million and $50 million. They asked, how much money do you need to be happy? And the answer might surprise you because it was the same across the entire wealth spectrum. The answer was twice what I have. So no matter how much money people had, they always felt like they needed more. They needed twice as much. So what I always say is, do you see what's happening here? It's what I call the hamster wheel. We run faster and faster, and it never stops. We never get to our destination. And so a few years ago, I was climbing on this rock formation outside of Boulder, Colorado. It's called the Third Flatiron. And I ran into a guy named John who told me about a financial principle that really impacted my life. And it's called the 4% rule. And you may have heard of the 4% rule or the FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early. Whether you have or hasn't doesn't matter, because I'm going to tell you my own little spin on it. But basically, it's a way to figure out how much money you need to achieve financial independence. And so the way it works is it's the 4% rule says to achieve financial independence, you need assets worth 25 times your annual living expenses. And assets could be like stocks, real estate, cash, whatever, your home. And so let's look at a quick example of that. Let's say that our annual living expenses are $240,000 or $20,000 a month after tax. I think we'd all agree you can live a good life on $20,000 a month. I'll tell you in a little bit how you can adjust this for your own needs. But 25 times that would be $6 million. So that's how much you'd need to achieve financial independence. And for many people, that's a daunting number. Like, how in the heck am I ever going to get to $6 million? The good news is this 4% rule allows you to play with the math a little bit and drive that number down. So for example, if we cut our monthly expenses from $20,000 to $15,000, that cuts our number down to $4.5 million. And the way the math works is for every $1,000 you cut from your monthly living expenses, you reduce your number by $300,000. And I've got, if you contact me at the end of this, I'll give you my email address. I've got a calculator that's really powerful for looking at different scenarios for yourself. But let's keep going. Let's assume now that, when we retire, when most people reach financial independence, they don't stop doing anything. I certainly didn't. Usually they'll have a side hustle or do contract work or whatever and to earn some ongoing income. In fact, you guys are in a great profession for doing that. If you work just a couple days a month or a handful of days a month, you can make really good income. And so that ongoing income reduces your number in the same way. For every $1,000 you commit to earning each month, once you've reached financial independence, you reduce your number by $300,000. So now we've cut our number to $3.6 million. Lastly, let's say that you've got passive income. So let's say over the years you work to build up passive income streams. For example, for me, I've got some real estate that provides passive income. Let's say your passive income is $3,000 a month. That also reduces your number the same way. And so now we've whittled a $6 million financial independence number down to $2.7 million. And the point is not the numbers here. Your numbers will be different than these, but this provides a framework. The 4% rule provides a framework in a very simple way for doing the scenario planning and figuring out for yourself, what is my number and what kind of lifestyle do I want once I reach financial independence? A lot of times people will push back on me and say, hey, I don't know, it just seems really hard to like save that much and acquire that many assets. I'll never reach that point. And I like to quote this statement from a famous climber named Jimmy Chen. He said, at either end of the financial spectrum, there lies a leisure class. And what he means by that is, if you make an enormous amount of income, obviously it's easy to be financially independent. But also on the other end of the spectrum, if you live a super simple life, it's easy to achieve financial independence. It's the middle that a lot of us get stuck in that's difficult. And the example I like to use is my friend Thomas, who's pictured here with me. We're climbing in Colorado. Thomas is an ex-military guy. He's now a climbing guide. He's never in his life made more than $70,000, but he's reached financial independence because he lives a very, very simple life. He's very careful with his money. His life is he works about 6 months a year and travels about 6 months a year. And so it's always inspiring to see people who aren't high income earners, but have built amazing life using this principle. All right, third item, upgrade from first class to economy. And what I'm talking about here, which is very much related to what we just talked about, is the fact that less is more, minimalism. So if you've ever seen the movie Fight Club, the lead character, Tyler Durden, says, the things you own end up owning you. And I think we can all relate to this, right? Like, we find that like the more things we own and have, each one of those things occupies some space in our mind. And it just makes life more complicated. I've got kind of a funny story around this. In my early 40s, I got a signing bonus for signing on as a chief marketing officer for this big company. It was a big signing bonus. And, my whole life, I'd been a car guy. In my teens, I had pictures of cars on my bedroom wall, and I was particularly enamored by the Porsche 911. I just thought it was the most beautiful car that had ever been created. So when I got this bonus, I was like, you know what? I've earned the right to go buy myself a Porsche. And so that's exactly what I did. I went to the Porsche dealership, and this is the actual car I bought. It's a Porsche 911 twin turbo convertible, amazing car. I took it home, showed it to my friends, put it in the garage. That night, I was laying in bed, and that car was stressing me out. And what I realized that night after buying the car was that I wasn't 16-year-old Kevin anymore. My priorities had changed. What brought me joy was not driving a fancy car anymore. So I did something kind of crazy. The next morning, I got in the car, drove it back to the dealership, and handed the keys back to the manager. And to his credit, he took the car back and said, hey, You're the first person who's ever done that. And look, it's different for everybody. I have friends who are huge car fanatics and collect fancy cars. That brings them joy, but for me, it's not. And so what I'm talking about is minimalism. And minimalism is a very misunderstood concept. A lot of people think that minimalism is a life of sacrifice, like living like a monk, denying yourself of all joy. And that's the opposite, actually, of what it is. Minimalism is about understanding what really brings you true joy and eliminating everything from your life that doesn't bring you joy to make space for a lot more of what does bring you joy. And it's different for everybody, right? So minimalism doesn't mean you can't have a fancy car or that I should return a Porsche if I buy it. That was specific to me. What brings joy to people is different. And so the challenge I would issue to you is look at everything in your life and just ask the simple question, does this thing bring me joy? Or is it actually just occupying space that could be cleared out and to make room for more joy? All right, next one, and we're moving quickly here. Number 4 is compare your camera roll, not your bankroll. And there's a saying that you might have heard, like comparison is the thief of joy. We can't help it, right? You go onto Instagram or Facebook and you see your friends or celebrities living this high roller lifestyle, and you can't help but compare. And when we compare, we all know what we're comparing, which is basically financial wealth, right? And I'm guilty of it too. I mean, I happen to run in a circle of, my inner circle of guy friends. They've all been ridiculously successful in business. In fact, I'm probably the least successful financially. And so I can't compare bank rolls with them, but I'll tell you what, I can compare my camera roll, because for a long time, I've made experiences my highest priority. After I rebooted life, as I described earlier, that's where I shifted my focus, is to collecting experiences, not things. And so a few years ago, I put this sticky note on our refrigerator at home. It says, Dahlstrom's invest in experiences. And it's pretty cool because it's kind of become our family mantra. My girls often will say this, we invest in experiences, and we put our money where our mouth is on that. One quick story related to this. So I made a deal with both of my girls where when they turned 16, I would take them anywhere in the world they want to go for a week. Just them and I, they plan the itinerary and I pay for it. And so this is my younger daughter, Allie. Last summer, she wanted to go ride the Orient Express train. We rode the train from Amsterdam to Venice, and it was a really bougie experience. It was awesome. But at the end of it, I asked Allie, I said, what was your favorite memory from that trip? And she said, Dad, it was actually getting coffee on St. Mark's Square in Venice. And I said, that was my favorite memory too. Guess what this cost? This was a $20 memory, right? So I paid for this incredibly expensive train ride for a week, and her favorite memory was just grabbing coffee and hanging out. And that just goes to show you that when I talk about investing in experiences, some of the best experiences cost nothing. You just have to make the time for it and make the effort. So question I'll leave you with is, what's on your camera roll? When you pull up your camera roll, is it full of experiences? All right, number 5 is be more than your work. I mean, many of you who are listening to this are very focused on your careers right now, and that's very understandable. You're trying to build a practice. You're trying to get ahead. I was the same way. I still am to a degree. But I'm here to tell you, if you remember this slide from earlier, career success is simply not enough. No matter how extreme your career success is, it's not enough. And so in my view, the goal is this. When you're young, you don't really have a choice. When you're building your career, you have to be mostly focused on your career. You do what you have to do to pay the bills, to support your family. And so work dominates your identity. But the goal is, over time, your identity should become less about work and more about other stuff. And I'll talk about in a second what other stuff is. It doesn't mean that you're not passionate about work anymore. It just means that you're deliberately moving toward that ideal end state life that you defined, so that by the time you get to be my age, which I'm 54, that work's not the biggest part of who I am anymore. It was for a long time. It's just not anymore. Other stuff occupies that space. And so how do you figure out what that other stuff should be? I often say, just ask 2 people that question, your 12-year-old self and your 80-year-old self, because they'll both tell you the same thing, which is just follow your passion, do stuff that brings you joy. I've got kind of a cool story related to this. So years ago, I started a company with a guy named Scott. I was the investor and he was the CEO. And this company got off to an incredible start. Within 2 years, we were doing $10 million in revenue. It was hitting on all cylinders. But eventually we hit a stumbling block. We stumbled a bit. We lost some big customers. Revenue went down. And at the same exact time, Scott, the CEO, went through a horrible divorce, custody battle. And I called him to check on him. And I said, Scott, how you doing? He said, I'm in a very dark place, man. I'm actually thinking about the worst. And fortunately, he was getting help already. But it was a really bad situation because his work was dominating his whole life. And so his mood went as his work went. And so when he had another thing like this family situation come in, it just crushed him. Well, the good news is I called him about a year. I sold out. It turns out we sold the company. I sold out, and I called him about a year later, and I said, Scott, how you doing? Have you recovered at all? He said, Kevin, I'm probably the happiest I've ever been in my life. He said, and I said, well, what happened? He said, on a whim, when I was at my darkest point, I remembered that I used to enjoy BMX racing. And so I Googled adult BMX racing league. And it turns out there's these BMX racing leagues in every major city in the US. And so I joined one, and it transformed my life. I lost 30 pounds. I got in shape. I met a community. I'm dating one of the girls from the BMX community. And so that just goes to show you the importance of having that thing in your life that always brings you joy. And that's my story as well. What I didn't tell you guys earlier is the biggest catalyst for me rebooting my life was that I had discovered rock climbing. It started as a hobby and eventually grew into a big part of my life. The community is where my closest friends come from. And so that was my story as well. Rock climbing for me is the thing I can always turn to no matter whether things are going good or bad in other parts of life. All right, so the last one, and then we're in the home stretch here, is the time is now. This is the final message I'll leave you with is we're all guilty of what I call someday thinking, right? So we say, first I'm going to save this much money, or I'm going to build my career, I'm going to build my practice, I'm going to do this. Then I'll focus on building a great life. And unfortunately, that's really not how it works, because often what happens is someday never comes. And I've got a kind of a sad story to illustrate this. When I was a young kid, I grew up in a small town in South Texas, and one of my uncles worked at a gas station, very, what you would call a poor family. And so this was back before, this was back when people paid cash for their gas. And every day he would bring home his tips from work, which was mostly change. And he would put it in these 5-gallon buckets in their home. And I used to visit their house, and I was always just blown away because to me, these 5-gallon buckets full of quarters and nickels and dimes seemed like infinite money. And my uncle would always say, this is our savings for going to Hawaii. Someday we're going to go to Hawaii. And the sad part is, about 10 years ago, my uncle found out that he had stage 4 bone cancer. And long story short, he passed away pretty quickly thereafter. I went to his house after the funeral, and I saw these jugs, and it really hit me hard because someday never came for my uncle. He saved for decades for that trip to Hawaii, and someday never came. And so make sure you're not that person. Whatever it is that you want to get done in life, make a plan for it. And so the last concept I'll talk about is time buckets. It's a really simple idea that can be really powerful. You can just use a worksheet like this. And if there's things you want to accomplish in your life, assign it to 1 decade of your life, right? This is for the big bucket list items, because, some things have to be done earlier in life, right? If you want to have kids, you're probably not going to do it in your 50s. You're probably going to do it in your 20s or 30s. And there's other things that are better to do later in life. Like if you want to travel the world, it's more practical. But one thing's for sure, if you don't plan for it, then someday will never come. And so let's land this plane. I've covered a lot of stuff really quickly. And so the last thing I'll leave you with is the question we started with, which is, if you really believe that you need more, there's more to life than career success, and that if you've observed, like I have, that there's so many people out there who have lots of money but aren't happy, then we all have to answer this question of what are we doing to be the exception? So with that, I'll just thank you. If you want to contact me for any reason, I love hearing stories and feedback. Here's my email address. You can take a screenshot of or a picture of this. You can follow me on X, which is where I do a lot of writing at Camp 4. And by the way, as a quick plug, I'm actually hosting an event in September here in Boulder for people who want to focus on building great lives and surround themselves with people who are of like mind. Use this QR code and you can sign up for the event and you'll receive more information via email. So thank you very much. And Allison, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Kevin. This was amazing. I'm thinking about my camera roll right now and what I can do to make it more exciting. But this is a great session, and we hope all of you who joined us live got a lot out of it. And we will email out the recording if you had to miss any part, and then also with the resources that Kevin mentioned, we'll include those as well. So it'll be posted in our community, and we will also send it out to anyone who registered but wasn't able to attend. But thank you all for joining us today, and we will see you next time. Bye.